Hi everybody. This video looks at some advanced MeshFusion techniques for creating and editing high definition strips. It's possible to get very smooth corners and to add cool strip profiles to your Fusion models. And while all of this will get better and easier in future MeshFusion updates, I know a lot of you are willing to learn a few tricks right now to make it happen. These techniques allow you to preserve the essential, ideal surface normals produced by Fusion while adding these strip treatments. The result is models that render perfectly and have high-def detail. Improved strip geometry and some strip-based tools, much like those I created for the MODO toolkit a few years back, are all in the works. But let's look at what can be done right now with MeshFusion 102. As you may know, converting Fusion's output meshes to Catmull-Clark is problematic. Fusion meshes have irregular polys and some triangles, which are not a problem when the output surface normals are in place. Converting to Catmull-Clark dumps those normals and creates a sub-D surface based on those irregular polys. That results in surface and shading artifacts. To get around that, we're going to treat the strip geometry separately. Unlike the overall output mesh, the strip geometry is perfectly orderly and all quad. Here's a simple Fusion model. It suffers from insufficient divisions in these tight corners. I've made them as obvious as possible by using a highly beveled strip profile. In future updates, we'll have adaptive density along the strip, which will lessen this problem. Nonetheless, the techniques I'm about to show will still be useful. In fact, they'll just be more effective. This model's strips have 4 rows, and because of the high bevel setting, the outer rows are very narrow. This is fine if you want super crisp strips, but perhaps not the most flexible setup for these techniques. And note that strip rows are global and set in the Fusion Items Properties tab, while width and profile are set at the strip item level. In any case, what we need to get started is an airtight mesh with parts. So let's go ahead and create that and give it a descriptive name. When doing this sort of strip editing, I'll often try using meshes with various strip settings. I select that mesh and go to the Statistics tab. There we find a polypart set named Fusion Item Strips, which naturally contains all the strip polygons. For these techniques, those will be the only polygons we edit. It is possible to edit other polys in ways that won't disturb the normals. But that's a subject for another video. Again, you can see the faceted corners, and that's the first thing we'll address. I'm going to work with the same model, but with different strip settings. 3 rows and a less tight bevel. Before we start editing, there are a couple of crucial settings to make. First, the active material must have its smoothing angle set high. You'll see why in just a few moments. Secondly, the normal map of our Fusion mesh must be selected. We are going to alter normals, but only those of the strip quads. Okay, so here again are those strip quads, which have a 1-to-1 correlation to their neighbors on the boundary. But what we want is more divisions along that boundary, so we'll subdivide the strip quads. And for that we'll use Catmull-Clark with the Smooth All option. Alright, that's much better. What it's done is created n-gons along the boundary, but those will render just fine thanks again to the exported normals from the Fusion mesh. We might want even more density and could subdivide again. And if all we wanted was improved strip fidelity, well, then we'd be done. But let's take this a step further and modify the strip profile. For that, I'm going to undo that last subdivision, and we're back to 1 subdivision of the strip quads, creating a 2-to-1 ratio along the boundary polys. Next, we'll temporarily toggle Catmull-Clark on. As you know, this is a dynamic mode, as opposed to the actual subdivisions we did a moment ago. Activating Catmull-Clark for only some polygons in a mesh breaks that mesh. You can't easily see it here, but the Catmull-Clark polys are not connected to their adjoining polys. But we're not going to worry about that because this is a temporary setup for the purpose of dynamically editing the strip polys. Since we already have pretty high density, I'm reducing the Catmull-Clark subdiv level to 1. Now we're ready to edit the strip. I'm using Shift down arrow to shrink the selection, and then dynamically applying a push deform. This is where having Catmull-Clark in effect helps. It gives us real-time interpolation of our edits, including surface normals. If we edited without Catmull-Clark active, shading would be wrong due to the fact that there's a normal map attached to those strip polys. As you can see, though, with Catmull-Clark active, I can dynamically edit and see a good representation of those edits in both the 3D viewport and the render preview. Here, I'm further shrinking the selection and adding more push. Once we're happy with the profile, we reselect all of the strip's polys and toggle Catmull-Clark off. And, predictably, the render goes bad. Again, that's because of the normals, which are now invalid as a result of our edits. Those normals are easily updated, but first let's make sure the normal map is selected. Selecting Set Vertex Normals will affect only the selected vertices, updating just their values in that normal map. And the render improves, though it's still not quite as nice as what we saw during active Catmull-Clark editing. We'll fix that in a second. But first, let's revisit our material. The smoothing angle mentioned earlier determines how normals will be calculated. We don't want any artificial sharpening, so we've set that angle very high. That ensures that everything gets smoothed. So now we're ready for the final steps. One more actual subdivision and another reset of the normals. And these final steps should only be done when we're completely happy with the strip geometry. So again, Catmull-Clark subdivision with the Smooth All option, followed by a reset of the strip poly normals. It's actually a pretty simple workflow once you've gone through it a couple of times. And the variety and quality of the results are definitely worth it. As I mentioned earlier, there are some enhancements in the works that will make this process easier and more effective, including things like variable density along the strip path. But right now, this is a great way to add some high-def detail to your Fusion models, and as I mentioned, it can be taken even further in ways that do involve the rest of the polygons in the Fusion mesh, and we'll look at that real soon in a new video. All right, that's about it for this one. Thanks.